What is your name?
And mine's Rich.
And who is your sober hero?
My sober hero is also called Rich. It's called Rich Roll. Um, finding ultra fame, and obviously the Rich Roll podcast now as well, which most people will be familiar with. He's a big influence in me, both in terms of kind of sobriety, but then also in terms of endurance racing as well.
So do you prefer books, films, or music?
I tend to prefer books these days. It's sort of changed over the years. I think in my younger hedonistic days it was music, and then probably more into films.
What's a book, film, or piece of music that has helped you in your recovery journey?
It's The Daily Stoic. I just think it's just a great book, and it's got 366 meditations or Stoic principles in there, which from thousands of years ago, but still very relevant today. But there's always something in there which is relevant to what's going on in your life in that particular moment.
Would you rather have fame or fortune?
I think I would rather have the fame, but the fame makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable because it would give me the best opportunity, I think, to build a legacy.
What does your ideal Friday night look like?
Well, we've got two kids, two young children. They're 8 and 11. They go to Stagecoach on a Friday night now for 3 hours between 4:30 and 7:30, which is an absolute dream because it's the one time of the week where me and my wife know we've got like a period of like normal adulting to be done. Just 3 hours of quality time between the two of us, which I think as parents of young children is really important to do.
Do you like IKEA?
I don't mind the products. I'm not sure about the place, IKEA. It's just a nightmare, isn't it? That you have to go round the whole bloody thing.
Okay then, if I gave you some IKEA flat pack to assemble, what would be your approach? Would you get a friend to help you out? Would you look at the instructions thoroughly? Would you just get stuck in, or would you kind of lay it all out, look at the picture, have a think about it, and then get started?
I would be very stubborn and a typical bloke and think I'm going to do this all myself, but I would just I'd definitely get the instructions out, and I would treat it a bit like I do recommendations to my running coaching clients, and that is to say, trust the process, stick to the plan, and trust the process.
Plugged your answers into our proprietary algorithm, Bjorn, and what he has concluded is that your sober style is the brain. So it's all about thinking and learning for you. So if the listeners would like to learn a little bit more about their sober styles, then they can visit flatpacksober.com, or you could just actually listen to Pet AI Bjorn telling you all about it for a second right now.
Do you get discouraged when the gurus recommend things that just don't work for you? That's why you need to know your sober style. Understanding how you approach alcohol-free living will help you make the most of what you hear, including the Flat Pack Sober. Learning how you solve problems won't just increase your self-awareness. It'll make cutting through all the recovery information much easier. And that'll make your alcohol-free life solid, like some well-built furniture. Take the Sober Style quiz for free at flatpacksober.com.
Hey there, sober superstars. Welcome to Flat Pack Sober, your catalogue of tips, tricks, and tactics to design your alcohol-free life. Now, we have reached a very important point in the life of the podcast. This is the last ever episode in season 2. So we're going to take a month off, and we'll be back again with season 3. Bigger, better, slightly worse jokes. I don't know. We've got some stuff planned. You'll find out all about that after our little break. But I thought I'd end it on a bang. I thought I'd end it with the wonderful Richard Casement, Rich, like Rich Roll, I suppose. And he's going to tell us all about the fantastic stuff he does to take a clean break. So, Rich, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Duncan. Appreciate it. What a great intro as well.
That's cool. That's cool. Let's get right down to it. Alcohol. Where did you come across it?
Well, probably like a lot of people in our sort of age bracket in sort of the 40s, it was fairly ingrained into culture in the UK, as many people know, back in the 80s and the 90s. And I would probably have first had a drink, I think, when I was at my local sports club. My dad used to play hockey and cricket on a weekend, and I used to kind of go and follow him, go with him on a Saturday afternoon, give my mum a bit of space. And yeah, he was round in the men's teams, and they would all be obviously, celebrating or commiserating their performances on the pitch after their matches. And yeah, and I think from probably about the age of sort of 12, 13, it was almost like a ceremonious, you'd get the opportunity to have like a half pint of shandy or something like that. And it was that sort of that, I suppose, that feeling of being included, as a young lad with your dad and his teammates. And it was almost like a ceremonious kind of thing. It's like, oh, now you're coming into manhood, now you're allowed to be part of the men, part of the group. So I think that's where it first sort of started to me. And yeah, I played a lot of sport myself from a young age, and of course then those kind of ceremonious behaviours and the sort of the aspect of rejoicing your wins or commiserating your losses, would be a big part of that. Out drinking would be a big part of that. And yeah, I think that's where it sort of first came around for me. And I would. Yeah, I would go out at weekends, with my friends. I was given quite a lot of flexibility as a kid. Like, I think I went on my first lads' holiday to Mallorca when I was 16. I remember it vividly because we came down on the first morning with a stinking hangover, having got there and got really drunk the night before, and the whole place was silent. It was one of those big kind of family sort of hotels in Mallorca, where I think it was in Magaluf or Palma, around there, and you've got the swimming pool, and then you've got the big, huge, great big sort of dining areas with tables. And then we went in there, and everyone was in there and finished their breakfast, and everyone was stone cold sober. And we kind of walked in sort of slightly hungover, a bit noisy, a bit loud, me and my best mate, and sort of were like, oh, what's going on here? This is a bit weird. And sort of sat down thinking this is all a bit strange, and then looked up at the screen, and it was a TV showing covering Princess Diana's death. So that was a really sort of somber moment. It was like, oh God, all right, okay, we need to be a bit more respectful here. But yeah, so I was around, I was around alcohol mainly through sports and more than anything else from a very young age, and then that bled into university again, more, a lot more drinking in association with sports. Again, the sort of the ceremonies that were involved, in the university sports teams. So yeah, and it just kind of continued really from there.
So there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot in that. I never played hockey. Come across a few hockey players. Tends to be a fairly hard charging sport, doesn't it? So there's all that kind of like that toughness and that manliness that you get associated with drinking, not just being an adult, but being a proper man. So you got all of that. You've taken all of that on board. You got through university. You got out into the real world. Uh, Doing a lot of drinking then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, drinking was just part of life through university, on a daily basis, let's face it. When you were capable of actually handling like the hangovers and sort of almost brushing them off, in your sort of late teens, early 20s, it felt like it was easy, didn't it, really? You felt almost indestructible in many ways. And the easiest way to overcome a hangover was to go and get a fry up and go and have another pint or a Bloody Mary with that fry up. So yeah, when I went to university, I went having worked in bars and restaurants and having taken a year off to do a bit of traveling around the world as well. I went to study hospitality management. So I kind of like was leading into a world of basically being able to use my hobby of drinking as part of my university degree, and then thinking around a career going forward as well. So, the alcohol in my life wasn't just a big part of my life as a consumer. It became a big part of my life vocationally as well for my career, because the university degree, the hospitality management, led into me working within hospitality, managing bars and restaurants. So kind of being surrounded by booze the whole time. And of course, it was, I think this is where I first sort of fell in love with the concept of being in service of others, which has led on to probably a more virtuous approach to being in service with others now. Whereas back then it was obviously, the service, it was all about giving good service to customers and giving them that hospitality experience that they're looking for, food with, not just with drink. I always worked in venues where it was sort of food and drink. But yeah, and then, that would lead to, late nights with the team, cleaning the lines on a Friday, Saturday night. There's always going to be jugs of beer knocking around. Inevitably, what would happen is you would get bought drinks by customers as well. So you'd have like, you might have a couple of receipts at the end of the night where you've got a couple of drinks that you've been bought and you could sort of cash those in. So it kind of, yeah, it just became such a big part of my life, inside of work on a personal level, but also on a vocational level.
Yeah, no, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? It's like you tried to turn your passion into your job. You just thought that your passion was alcohol, and it turned out to be the service of other people. So that's, I guess, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Anywho's, yeah, I mean, did it? How did it reach a kind of a head? How did it get to a point where you thought this is enough? This is time for me to do something.
Yeah, I think my drinking was probably at its peak through the uni days, certainly through my 20s. And it was drinking and taking drugs as well. So it was like, it was clubbing, it was definitely going out, late nights, all night parties, festivals, raves, all this kind of stuff. So it was pretty hedonistic. And, I think like alcohol was a bit of a gateway drug for me in many ways to other things because, I would inevitably only ever take other drugs when after I'd been drinking. So, I can certainly look back and see that and appreciate that now. Through my 30s, my relationship with alcohol started to change. I started to really struggle with the both initially the physical impact of drinking, like really quite crippling hangovers, headaches, and I could never understand like people like my mates who would just be like who would sort of bounce up and seem to be absolutely fine and could get up and function normally, get up at a normal time, would seem to be and by this point as well in my 30s, I'd moved away from hospitality management because I'd sort of recognized that there was lots of sacrifices I was making on a personal level with regards to giving up, weekends and Christmases and missing out on like family members' big birthdays and things like that. So I moved away from hospitality management and I actually went to recruitment initially and started recruiting people for the hospitality industry. But then I went into sales roles within the alcohol industry. So I kind of became the sort of the pusher or the peddler, if you like. So almost like the facilitator, working for different drinks brands, which of course meant I was still able to get the stuff, the great experience of having my hands on the substance, on the alcohol, being in the bars, talking to the bartenders, getting all the freebies, getting all the opportunities that I had before. But I was working a sort of a fairly normal, shift, if you like, Monday to Friday, and then my weekends were free. And then, of course, that freed up even more time at the weekends, to get pissed ultimately. So it was definitely through my 30s when that part of my career evolved. And I just found that like it was almost like drinking was kind of like a badge of honor if you worked in the industry. I worked with, so for example, I worked with Jägermeister, the brand Jägermeister, which anyone of any age probably recognizes that brand, and it was it was just synonymous with doing shots at the bar at any time, and it was like a sort of a celebratory moment, and it was almost sort of expected, and I never particularly enjoyed doing it, but I just kind of went with it. And I think it just got to a point in my 30s where actually those physical effects, headaches, hangovers, lethargy, and then that started to bleed into kind of mental angst as well, like anxiety and periods of depression and low mood as well. And then, yeah, it kind of progressively got worse and worse to the point where my late 30s, I just started taking longer breaks. So I'd do dry January, and then like I'd do dry January plus February, and then I'd do dry January, February, and March. So I'd do sort of 3 month stints without boozing and get all the benefits. But then inevitably I'd always end up going back to drinking. It was part of my job ultimately. And I think, for several years before I stopped, I kind of had in the back of my mind, when people say, "Oh, I'm never drinking again," and then people sort of say it, and then by kind of 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you've got a glass of red wine in your hand, sort of thing, or a pint of shandy, or whatever. Like for me, it really became something which I really thought was going to happen at some point. I just thought progressively not, and it's this cycle of change, isn't it? Raising the awareness, and I was kind of every hangover I had was progressively moving me towards this sort of idea of I'm not sure I'm getting anything from this anymore. And then I just got to, the stage in my late 30s when obviously we had kids, and, the hangovers don't just affect you, they affect other people around you. They affect your family, they affect the kids, they affect your relationship with your partner, if you're not showing up for her or not showing up for the kids as well. And then there's that shame and that guilt that compounds the effects as well. And yeah, and then we got to COVID, and typically, like most people, the first couple of months of COVID was very, very nice weather. I was on furlough because the hospitality industry shut down. And, it was another day with a Y at the end of it. So it was time to have a glass of rosé at midday or a gin and tonic. And it was like that for a bit, but I quickly realized that wasn't going to be a helpful way to spend this period. And actually, that's when I pivoted more into focusing on exercise and using my hour a day for generally for running for me. And that was kind of almost like my therapy in that period. And I would still find that there was periods when I'd drink in excess. I remember a couple of really ridiculous times when I was drinking in COVID, which were just like embarrassing to look back on, sort of things that I'd done. And then when we came out of COVID and the hospitality industry reopened, and obviously we went back to work, something had changed. Something in me had changed, and I couldn't work out what it was. And I couldn't get back into work. Like the thing that I'd been doing for 20 years, working in that industry, that career that I'd built to a pretty senior, reasonable level, doing the job that was ultimately almost like a dream job for me by that stage. I just couldn't get back into it, and I couldn't pinpoint what was going on. I knew something wasn't right, and I knew there was something that just didn't sit well with me. I was depressed. I remember thinking midway through 2021, when COVID restrictions finally started to fully lift. I remember, processing some really dark thoughts at one point and thinking, yeah, this isn't right. And alcohol wasn't the root cause of the problem, but I certainly knew it wasn't helping. And then over the course of the next sort of 6 months in the second half of 2021, I think really was where, I really started to solidify this idea that I was going to take a break. I was going to take a clean break. And I remember running the Manchester Marathon in the October of 2021 and driving over there from Leeds to Manchester, and in the morning by myself listening to a Mel Robbins podcast. And there was something that said in that podcast that just brought me to tears. And I remember thinking in that moment, Christ, like something's not right here. I need to do something about this. I need to get some help. I need to sort myself out. I ran the marathon, got a PB, celebrated, was, physically in the best shape of my life, but mentally I was not in a great place at all. And then typical bloke, I didn't do anything about it for a couple more months. Made the decision that I was going to take a break from drinking. I'd signed up to after just reading Rich Roll Finding Ultra, actually, I decided I was going to sign up to a half iron distance triathlon, which was in the June of 2022. And that was my excuse, because we need an excuse why we don't take drugs and drink alcohol, don't we? So my excuse was that I was training for this event, so that, if anyone asked me why I wasn't drinking, I'd just say, well, I've just got a big triathlon event in summer of 2022, June 2022. So it's like, oh, okay, yeah, no worries. And that was it really. And I sort of knew, and I stopped on the 30th of December 2021. And I sort of knew in the back of my head, if I got to that point, 6 months to the event without drinking, I kind of knew deep down inside that I might not rush back to it. But I was still working in the alcohol industry, obviously, as well. So I didn't think about what that would mean for my career. I just thought, I'm going to take a break. I know I'm going to get the benefits. I know it's going to help me with doing this event. I need to train at a certain level, and alcohol's not conducive to that. I'll work the rest of it out later. And within a couple of months, again, I was like getting all the benefits, and I just knew that there was a good chance I wasn't going to go back to it. And then when I did that event, my mates were like, "Oh, brilliant! You've done that. Great. You're going to start drinking again now." I was like, "No, I don't want to. I don't want to. Why would I? I'm getting all of these benefits physically, mentally." And I'd started working with coaches at that point as well, who were helping me to cement and crystallize the benefits that I was getting. Certainly on a physical level, they were helping me to unpick some of the stuff that I was going through, that I'd been going through mentally. In terms of belief systems, values, other habits as well, which were needed to be unpicked, and just live my life in a better way, really. So that was how that panned out.
So it wasn't just stopping drinking; it was starting living, and looking at the broader kind of stuff. Although I am slightly disappointed in you because you said you liked films earlier, although you've clearly never seen Scarface, or at least you forgot that bit where he tells you not to get high on your own supply, which seems like what you were doing working in the alcohol industry and drinking it. But so there was kind of a lot of thinking, a lot of reading and understanding, a lot of coaches, and then you'd kind of got to the point where you were just enjoying not drinking. What did you end up doing about the job, though? I mean, how did you get out of the alcohol industry, or do you still work there?
I don't still work there. No, no. Yeah, it's difficult because that was all I'd ever known, since pretty much since leaving school. It's over 20 years, and I'd sort of invested a lot of my time and energy and efforts into kind of carving out a career, quite a successful career as well. And look, I think for the vast majority of that period, like I look back, and think I had a great career. I really enjoyed it. I met some amazing people. I got to travel the world, visited loads of different countries, met, generations old wine producers in the middle of nowhere in Rioja, and the Italy and France. And these are people that aren't, they are not drug dealers trying to do anyone any harm. These are like generations old family businesses that have been around for centuries. They are just trying to create a living, and they have, a lot of them have some incredible stories to tell. And this is where I think I have a slightly different view on alcohol and the alcohol industry. I think to some people in the sober sphere, and I certainly don't hate alcohol. My belief is that alcohol's not the problem. It's often used as the solution to the problems, and that was the case for me. But I think actually it's the relationship that we have with alcohol that's the problem. Certainly in our society, because if alcohol was the problem, then everyone would have a problem with it. You would assume, and that's not the case. So I think I look back favorably in my career, so I would never have any regrets about it. It just got to the point where, as a consumer, it wasn't serving me anymore. I wasn't enjoying the effects that I was having on alcohol. And when I removed it, I realized actually that it didn't align with my values anymore, because my values pivoted to away from, sort of short-term pleasurable experiences. My values moved away from the things that I perceived as value in my 20s and 30s, and moved towards valuing more around health and well-being, more about opportunity and adventure, more about being in service of other people and giving back positively. So I didn't feel that career aligned with my values anymore. And I think it was probably around the time that I did that event, the triathlon event, and I just thought, this isn't going anywhere. I had to make that decision. The problem was for me is I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew what I didn't want to do anymore, but I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, because that's all I'd done for 20 years. And I didn't even finish my degree. I quit my degree. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I ended up finding sort of a segue job, which wasn't the right job. I wasn't right for them and they weren't right for me, but it was the right thing at the right time to help me move out of what I wasn't meant to be doing. And in that period between, what was it, August, sort of July, August 2022 and September, October 2022, sort of a 3 month probation period of that job, was when I kind of came up with the concept of Clean Break, which is now my lifestyle brand. And that started life as an idea to write a book originally. Quickly realized that that wouldn't be a particularly good source of income for me, or sustainable source of income, at least not at the moment. But there was something in it that I really liked, and I went on a retreat with my coaches, and that was where I kind of was able to do a lot of work around limiting beliefs and kind of stories that I told myself for many years about, self-worth and not being good enough, or not being able to do X, Y, and Z, or I could never start my own business, haven't got enough money, haven't got enough skills, haven't got enough knowledge, all of this kind of crap, these stories that we tell ourselves, and worked through that and came back from that and was like, yeah, I'm going to launch my own business. I'm going to launch my own brand. And then funnily enough, that Segway job let me go because they realized, as much as I did, that I wasn't right for them and they weren't right for me. And I remember my boss at the time bringing me in on a Monday morning and saying, yeah, I know this is you thinking it's going to be probation review, but actually we're going to let you go. We're not going to renew your contract. We're going to let you go as of today. And I could see he was really nervous. We were quite close. We became quite good friends, and had a lot of admiration for him. And he'd realised that I'd taken a big risk in leaving that career to join them. So I think he recognised, I had family at home, and he felt uncomfortable with letting me go, but it was the right thing to do. And I just remember stopping and pausing for a second or two and looking at him and saying thank you. And he kind of said, well, what do you mean? I don't understand. And I just said, well, I've got this idea that I've come up with, and I'm going to do it anyway. I was probably just going to tread water here for 6 months, which wouldn't have done you any favors and wouldn't have done me any favors. But actually, by letting me go, this is the catalyst to me going and throwing myself into this idea that I've got. And I told him and I explained what it was, and he just went, brilliant. He said, fair play. It sounds awesome. I've got huge respect for you for doing that. Good luck. If there's anything I can do to help you, then let me know. And then the rest is history, really.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Look, you've said a lot of things that I really like the sound of: values, self-limiting beliefs, all of that sort of stuff. And I know that's the kind of work that you do these days. So we will get into that in 1 second. But Bjorn is tapping me on the shoulder and reminding me that he's got something else to share. So we'll let him take the stage.
You've listened this far. You're definitely a part of a Flatpack Sober family. Why not make it official by joining the Facebook group? It's full of tips, tricks and tactics to help you design your alcohol-free life. You'll get sneak peeks, exclusive content, great offers and VIP tickets for our events. And you know that community is crucial for alcohol-free living. It's like the lingonberry jam for your meatballs. Join now by searching for Flatpack Sober on Facebook or visiting flatpacksober.com. You'll be welcome even if you don't want to follow the arrows.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm joined today by Rich Casement, the famous guy from the Clean Break stuff. So, Rich, you said something that I think really kind of resonated with me, probably resonated with a lot of people in that kind of early stage when they just stopped drinking. I don't know what I want to do, but I do know what I don't want to do. So how do you get from just simply knowing what you don't want to do anymore to getting to where you want to be and, understanding what your kind of mission and purpose is?
Yeah, I think from one of the analogies I often use when it comes to self-development, which I think is something that a lot of people get to a point in their life, certainly in sort of the middle of their life, if you like. I think a lot of people call it a midlife crisis. I don't see it as a crisis. I just think it's a phase. It's a new phase that you're coming into, and a new phase requires a new approach, and it requires, new beliefs and a new way of looking at things. And I think for a lot of people, they get to that stage where it's like, oh, actually, like I need to do something different. Going away and reading books and, bringing all this new stuff in, whether it's listening to podcasts, reading books, all of this kind of stuff. And that's great. And that's brilliant for sort of raising awareness, if you like. But, knowing what you need to do and not actually doing it is almost like not knowing what you need to do anyway. So I think for me, it's about the famous quote that I go back to is Michelangelo, when he was creating the statue of David, was asked, this is just incredible. What an incredible thing you've created. How did you have the vision to know what you were going to create? And he just said, well, I didn't. I just started unpicking the bits that weren't meant to be there, that I knew weren't meant to be there. And this is what I was left with. And I think that's for a lot of people what I tend to advise people to do. It's kind of the sort of the idea of true self. We talk about, people say, oh, you show your true colors when you're drunk. It's like, well, no, that's not true at all. You show a version of yourself which is intoxicated with a substance that makes you do and say things that you wouldn't normally do or say if you were sober. So I don't think it's a true version of ourselves. I think it's a conditioned version of ourselves that's been created by society. Society's, kind of matrix that is, ultimately driven and influenced by people with a lot of money that can spend money on very clever, influential marketing campaigns, because ultimately marketing is essentially emotional blackmail. And when you're emotionally blackmailed into thinking that you need to be taking a drug for X, Y, and Z, which is highly addictive, readily available, socially acceptable, in fact, it's even encouraged, that's a pretty dangerous recipe. So yeah, that's the kind of problem that sort of I tend to have with regards to alcohol. And I think what people should do is look at it in terms of creating. When you stop drinking, you kind of almost giving yourself a blank canvas. Yes, for many people you're creating a void in your life, and it was the case for me. That void, that me removing alcohol from my life on a personal and a vocational level created a massive void. I didn't have the thing that I lent on for, for socializing with my mates. I no longer had the thing that was holding on to the thing that was giving me a career. So there was a massive loss of identity there on very, very different levels, and it did create a void in my life. But it was when I was capable, when I would found the sort of the mindset to be able to flip that belief and actually see that void as an opportunity rather than something that I was missing out of, some form of scarcity. That void was creating me opportunity to go and almost like create my own masterpiece. It was like, right, and the powerful coaching question is, if you knew you couldn't fail and no one was judging you, what would you do? It's like, right, okay, I've got this blank canvas, I've got this opportunity to pretty much reinvent myself almost at the moment and almost start from scratch, which is difficult when you're in your early mid 40s to do, and you've got two kids and you've got responsibilities and bills to pay and all that kind of stuff. But having that choice, knowing that we've all got that choice around what we believe. We can't control the things that happen to us in our lives. Though most of that is out of our control, whatever those events are. But we all have ownership and agency over being able to control and choose what we believe about those situations. So in that moment, I could choose to believe that I'd sacrificed a 20-year career. I could choose to believe that I'd wasted my university time pursuing something that never led to anything. But what I actually chose is to believe that everything that had happened to me up until that point in my life had brought me to that situation. And I was now in a very, very lucky position. And I was very grateful to be able to use that channel that experience and that knowledge that I'd had to do something better, to do something different, and to give something back in many ways. And so, for me, it was about, right, what do I want to create? Who do I want to become? And who do I want to help? And that's where Clean Break kind of came from, because originally it started life as the idea for a book, Clean Break: My Messy Divorce from Alcohol, which I will still write at some point. And then it kind of pivoted into this idea, actually, like, Clean Break stands for taking a clean break from things that are no longer serving you in your life, which is exactly what I did. I took a clean break. I decided to make a clean break away from the things that were no longer serving me in my life. And it's this idea of chipping away and removing the things, parts of you that aren't meant to be there, because we're all conditioned. That true version of ourselves is us when we are 11, 12, 13 years old. When we're uninhibited, where we're not influenced by alcohol or drugs, or most of us aren't anyway. We're running around with our friends, playing on our bikes. We're free. We have that freedom of expression without if that fear of sort of judgment, we'll say and behave in the way that we think is most appropriate in the moment, without worrying about the future or regretting the past decisions. And so going back to that sort of true version of yourself, I think, is where people need to get to, or where I encourage people to get to when I'm coaching them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's such a powerful place to be, isn't it? To be, I don't want to use the word authentic or congruent because they're a bit cliched and both kind of fairly awful. But it's being, aligned with who you are and making everything kind of line up. And I guess, that clean break thing, it's not simply about chipping away, is it? It's not simply about making that break. It's actually about embracing it and enjoying what remains rather than worrying about what you've left on the floor, what you've
Mm,
kind of got rid of, celebrating what you do have rather than being sad about what you've lost. Is that
mm.
kind of one of the things that you think about or work on?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah, what you said there in terms of sort of alignment and trying to live your life, and your actions that you take on a daily basis, if they're not aligned to your values, then the likelihood is there's going to be some friction in your life. You're going to find that you feel misaligned, and something feels a little bit off. So, and those values do change over time. My values now are different to my values in my 20s, in my 30s. I think that's why it's important to do that reflective piece every few years, and just revisit those. But yeah, it's about not seeing it as scarcity, not seeing it as sort of missing out, but it's, what can you now create going forward? What does this, one of my values now is to seek opportunity and adventure. So everything that I do aligns to the values. Does what I'm doing give me allow me to seek opportunity and adventure? And that comes with a degree of not knowing the answer or not knowing the outcome, not necessarily not knowing how to do something at first, but doing it anyway, and also not knowing whether it's going to be successful or not, but doing it anyway, without the fear of getting it wrong.
Yeah. Funnily enough, my values in my 20s and 30s were pretty much where's my next drink coming from? I'm not sure that necessarily counts as a value, but it was very much top of mind. So they have changed a little bit, shall we say? Um, but you mentioned kind of like revisiting your values every few years. How do you kind of help or suggest that people go about doing that? What's a good way to get started with uncovering those values?
Yeah, well, values are essentially what matters to you, what's important to you. What are the things that you value in life, whether it's health, well-being. For some people it might be more material possessions, and that's absolutely fine. What is it that drives you? What is it that motivates you? And I think, you start with, the long lists of values that you can find online, and some of them might be relevant, some of them, might be purposeful for you, but others might not. But I think distilling those down into, a list of sort of 8 to 10 words, values, things that have meaning to you, and then looking at them and asking yourself, right, where in my life am I living in alignment with these values? Where am I living out of alignment with these values? How is that affecting me in my day-to-day life? Are these things actually important? And then just condensing them down to a list that feels most appropriate for you. I've condensed my personal values down into sort of three sets of pairs of values, if you like. Seek opportunity and adventure being one of those, and that for me right now feels right and appropriate to everything that I'm doing as a person within the business, but individually as well.
Yeah, nice. I love the way you said 8 to 10 because I have nine. Uh, but one of which might well be totally contrarian and don't pick a round number. Anyway, no, so that's really good. That's great advice. But I really want to get into exercise because I think that probably is where you're seeking a lot of those adventures these days. So let me start with this basic question: why should anyone run up a hill? What's that all about?
Because you can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mallory. You want to expand on that at all?
We're not built to be sedentary beings, you know. We're built to be active, you know, and being active, and it's not just about running. So this is the thing: it's not solely about running. It's about movement. You know, it's about moving our bodies. You know, physically, which then helps us, you know, in the both in the physical sense, we get the physical benefit from doing the movement, but we also get the mental benefit from it as well. It's been one of the biggest things that supported me in terms of my own mental health when I've been going through periods of poor mental health. And I used to see it, and I did in COVID. I made the mistake of kind of almost seeing it as therapy. You know, I almost kind of used it as my therapy, and now I recognize that it's not a replacement for therapy. It is therapeutic in many different ways, but it's not a replacement for going and speaking to people and you know, opening up about the things that are going on in your world, whoever that is, whether it's a coach, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a partner, a friend, you know, whoever it might be. It's yeah, it's a cliche, it's good to talk, but it really is. And part of the reason, one of the reasons why I now host a running group, which is primarily a peer-to-peer mental health support group with a really relaxed 5K attached to it, because I know people come and they open up a little bit more when they're shoulder to shoulder running together rather than face to face. So, you know, we've got people that come along on a Tuesday night who really value that safe space, that environment, you know, where we're running and we're moving our bodies together. We're enjoying the fresh air, we're enjoying nature and the environment. And they feel more comfortable to open up in a group of people that get it and understand. So it's the movement for physical benefit, it's the movement for mental benefit, and it's the movement for emotional and spiritual benefit as well. Because all of those component parts for me are linked. You know, the mind, body, and soul alignment. You know, when I'm talking to people about running and I'm coaching people and helping them go from couch to 5K or 5 to 10 or up to half marathon, ultra marathon distance, whoever it is at any point in their journey, it's about aligning the mind, the body, and the soul, because those are the three component parts that help you move your body effectively. Sometimes your mind will want to go out for a run. It will be telling you need to go out for a run, but your body won't want to. Sometimes your mind won't want to do it, but your body will be itching to get out. You'll have pent up energy. Sometimes neither of those will want to go for a run, and that's when you have to go into your soul and remind yourself of your why. Take it from the heart, you know. And why do you want to go for a run? Because it makes you feel good. Or why do you want to move your body? Because you know it makes you feel good. So it's about aligning those component parts, and using the thing that nature's been so kind to give us, you know, and not waste it, because you know it's a beautiful thing. And you know, it's the simplest form of exercise, you know, running, walking, you know. And I empower people to run, walk. You know, there's a concept called jeffing, which comes from a guy in America called Jeff Galloway, which is basically a combination of running and walking. We've just helped coach a lady, wonderful lady in one of our marathon groups called Carol, 68. She started running at 62. She's just jeffed her way to her first marathon in London back in April. You know, and she just did it, you know, 2 or 3 minutes running, 1 minute walking, you know, did that the whole way round, because every time you walk, you're recovering. So it's less stress on the body. And that's what I do with people. That's how we help people, you know, on the most basic levels, right up to the sort of the marathon and ultra marathon stage.
Fantastic, fantastic. I think, you know, it's so important to sort of acknowledge that there's so much more to physical activity than, you know, simply the physical benefit there, you know. And you've done that very eloquently. Although I am slightly annoyed that I can't come up with a sort of psychotherapy park run pun for your group, but I don't know. It'll come to me about 10 o'clock this evening, won't it? All right. So one more question about IKEA. You said you're not that keen on the place. Have you ever tried the meatballs?
I don't think I have, actually. I know they're quite famous.
Yeah,
Although my daughter likes meatballs, so maybe we should take her for meatballs at IKEA.
maybe you should. Yeah, report back. No. So you've never tried the meatballs, which is good, because normally when I ask people if they like the meatballs or not, they give me the wrong answer. Because the correct answer is no, I don't like the meatballs, Duncan. I only feel like I've got to eat them when I'm at IKEA. And that's my theory about them. You know, nobody really likes them. You just kind of feel like you've got to do it because you're at IKEA.
Yeah.
Which is the segue into this question. What is the thing that nobody really wants to do when they get sober, but they should? So what kind of stuff should people be doing, definitely in sobriety, even though they don't want to be doing it?
Well, there are lots of things, I think, in that bracket, especially in the early days, which kind of people perceive as it's the things that the people think they need alcohol for. So for confidence, to socialize, to dance, whatever it might be, going to a wedding, going on holiday. So it's all of those things. It's leaning into all of those firsts, those sober firsts, embracing them, without the desire to have alcohol, because you will get cravings. And here's the thing with cravings. Cravings, when people get a craving, they're not craving alcohol. They're craving a feeling. And alcohol ain't going to give them that feeling. They think alcohol is going to give that feeling. The feeling could be relaxation. The feeling that they crave could be excitement. The feeling that they crave could be joy. The feeling that they crave could be connection. Alcohol doesn't give any of those feelings. It does in many ways the exact opposite. But when you sit with those emotions, and you take some time to really think about what it is that your body, your mind, or your soul is telling you. What is it that I'm craving here? I'm craving a feeling, a particular feeling. And there's so many other things out there that can give you that feeling, whether it's breath work, whether it's meditation, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's picking up the phone to a friend, whether it's going for a coffee with your kids, for a brunch on a weekend morning, whatever it might, doing some exercise, whatever it might be. So I think encouraging people to lean into those fears, whatever those fears are, whatever that reluctance is, whatever that apprehension is, lean into it, because I guarantee that actually doing it is far less scary and far less uncomfortable than the perceived idea or view of doing it is.
Oh, mate, you absolutely right. You've got to do those things just to prove to yourself that you can actually enjoy dancing without drinking. That's
Mm.
so important. And I also make you incredibly right. Most people, they don't want a beer, do they? They don't want ethanol. They want the illusion, and it always was an illusion. So go and find something that will actually meet your needs. That is a fantastic way to wrap it up. But just before I do let you go, how can people find out more about the wonderful work that you are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So social media, we've got our Instagram page. It's take.a.clean break. And then same on Facebook as well. Website is take-a-clean break. You can find us on there. And then I'm also on LinkedIn. Have got a business page, but I tend to do more work on my personal page on LinkedIn, which is just Rich Casement. So yeah, you can see us, follow us, see all the things that we're doing around coaching. Essentially, we are running coaches for the alcohol-free or sober curious, but we're also sober alcohol-free coaches for runners as well. So we kind of send it both way. We send the joys and benefits of both things both ways.
So alcohol-free, no, so running for the sober curious and sobriety for the running curious. Yeah,
Exactly.
you're not really going to hire me as your PR dude, are you? So perfect. Look, thank you so much for your time today, Rich. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
We're nearly out of time, but for some reason we will have a few screws left over. Don't forget to check out flatpacksober.com. You'll find exclusive merchandise, the Sober Style quiz, the Facebook group, and the show notes. Experience the wonderful AF. Visit flatpacksober.com.
I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did bringing it to you. If you love what you're hearing and want to stay updated, join the Flat Pack Sober community on Facebook. Don't forget to click the subscribe button.